Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Last Friday was my last day in a company I spent 8 years in, and I left having nothing else lined up to follow. Now, I know that admittedly that seems like a terrible decision, but there's logic in the madness. And I figured that actually telling the story might just give you something to take away, because I know there's some lessons learned that I'm going to bring with me. So I figured, let's just share the video, talk through it, and again, maybe somebody else out there might have something that they can take away from it. Now, I will say before I get into this video, it's completely unscripted. I'm away with my family, which is why I'm in a new location this week. But as I said, it's just a story that I think is worth telling, and putting too much of a script on it felt like I would be trying to, fabricate something. So I figured let's just tell the story and see what comes out. But before I get into why I made that decision, it's important to give it a little bit of context as to the background. So this company, while I'm not going to share what it is, I was with them for 8 years, and actually it was 8 years to the day. In that length of time, I had spent all of my career with them in operations. So it's a alcoholic beverage manufacturing company, and I'd always worked on the front lines. I'd started with them as a bottling team member working in their bottling hall, and by the time I had finished, my second last role, which I'll get to in a moment, was running their distillery here in Ireland. And I loved it. I made some really good friends, really good connections, and I really got a lot of opportunities that I probably wasn't ready for, but with the support allowed me to grow and develop into the person who's sitting in front of this camera talking to you today. And that all sounds positive, and it is. But back in January, I made a decision to put my name in to apply for a L&D partner role, so learning and development partner role within the company. Because on paper, that seemed like a really good decision for me based on where my interests have migrated to over the last 8 years. I came into this role with a background in mechanical engineering, and I never seen myself moving away from that. But as I went through my leadership roles and actually started making YouTube videos and working with one-on-one coaching clients, I realized that I had a real passion for helping people develop themselves and turn their lives into something that they were incredibly satisfied by. And so when this role came up, it felt like an absolute no-brainer to put my name forward for it. And in the end, I was ultimately successful in receiving that role, and I actually started in May this year, so just over a month ago. So if this role on paper was so perfect, why did I hand in my notice? Well, as I was going through the recruitment process for that role, I actually unofficially got wind that if I didn't get that role, I was highly likely to be made redundant. And as I was going through the process, I was still on the fence as to whether it was the right role for me, and asking the questions that everybody does going through an interview process, and I was very much on the fence. But getting wind that I was going to be made redundant almost solidified this direction forward. I was very happy in the company, I was very happy with the people I knew and the connections I had, and I really thought that this was a step forward to a direction that I wanted to bring my career in the future. And so I stuck with it. I went through the process and was, as I said, very grateful to actually receive an offer for the role and formally start in the start of May. But once I received the role and things started maybe, quieting down as I finished up one role and started another one, there were some things that came to my realization that just didn't quite line up with what I thought would materialize. And I've broken this down into 3 different categories. The first one is more so about the role itself, and I don't want to get across the point here that I was sold a lemon in the initial interview process, so when I had the conversation with the hiring leader. But the reality is that due to a new people officer joining the organization and the landscape of what was required changing in the length of time it took me from going from application to actually getting the role, meant that the role was a little bit different than maybe I had expected. Rather than me working with individuals or teams to try and figure out what their problems are, what the ideal solution might be, and help them form a path to get from A to B, it ended up being more political, convincing senior stakeholders in the business that L&D was a positive thing to do and that it was worth the investment, even if the return on that investment wasn't immediately obvious through tangible results. And this is often a challenge you'll get in L&D, is that how do you justify the time and money investment in, let's say, a team working session? And so receiving the role, I actually very quickly realized that I was actually going to be doing less helping people get from point A to point B and more politics. And that was red flag number one, where I was just like, this isn't really what I thought this was going to be. The second reason is that actually, because of that landscape change and the shift in the direction that the L&D team were maybe going, meant that the travel that I was signing up for was actually a lot more than I had initially anticipated for. So as I said at the start of this video, I've got a newborn son at home. Well, he's 8 months old now, so not quite newborn. But being away from him and my family isn't something that I wanted to do all that often. And while the level of travel that I signed up for initially was something that was manageable, the change and increase that happened over the length of time of my application meant that it no longer was. And so that was red flag number 2. And lastly, and to a significant but maybe lesser point, is that actually some of the decisions within the company itself, not associated with either role I had, I maybe didn't agree with. Now, don't get me wrong, businesses need to make decisions, and all of the decisions that were made I completely agree with. That from a business point of view, they're logical, they make sense, and I probably would have made the exact same decisions myself. But where I had some issue with is more so how the business communicated these decisions to the wider organization and essentially their employees. And without airing dirty laundry in this video, I just didn't agree with how they were communicated, and I actually felt that, you know, people were maybe taken advantage of a little bit. And I don't necessarily think that was deliberate. I think it's just where the business was and the pace at which these decisions were being made meant that communication channels broke down and people were blindsided with updates that they really weren't expecting. And so that didn't sit well with me. So all in all, being in a position where I was forced down a path due to redundancy, and that path ended up bringing me to a point where it wasn't what I had signed up for, it felt like something had to give, and that left me with 3 options. I could either do what I've done and hand in my notice and finish immediately, which felt like the best decision for a few reasons, which I will get to. Or I could do one of 2 other things. The first one is stick it out for a year, be unhappy, and leave then, which didn't really fit with my values and everything that I've talked about on this channel. It's like, why stick with something that you're unhappy with if you know you're unhappy with it? Just do something else and figure out what will make you happy. And so that was very, very quickly ruled out. But the third option that I had was to stick the role out, but immediately start applying for positions. And maybe, I don't know, that might take 2 months, 3 months, but then leave the organization at that stage. And that actually didn't feel right either, because that would be directly impacting the learning and development team. And the team in the company I worked for that worked in L&D are amazing, and I cannot say enough good things about them. And so it felt like I would be shafting them for them to think that they've got somebody in the role for the long term, only for me to jump ship after 2 or 3 months. And that felt wrong as well. So ultimately what I landed on was put my notice in straight away and leave immediately, because that ticks a few boxes. It means that I'm not sitting in a role that I'm not really doing to the best of my ability because I'm so unhappy. But I'm also not signaling to the L&D team that actually, do you know what, you've not got somebody in the role here and you're good to not hire anybody. I'm just delaying the length of time it takes for them to find the right candidate. And so that's how I landed on, I think it's time, I think actually it's time to go. And I think it's important that all of that context is something that I share, because all of those realizations I had in terms of the role not being right, the level of travel, and maybe some of the questions I have over how the decisions were made within the company, none of those were immediately obvious to me until I actually slowed down naturally as part of the role. So the previous role I had was always go, 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 and because I hadn't really got on board with this role yet, things had slowed down. And it was only when things slowed down that actually these realizations came to me. And there were probably realizations that I've had for a while, especially when it came to some of the decisions that the company made. And that for me is the reason why I wanted to make this video. As somebody who spends a huge portion of their time trying to think and understand where my mind is at, where I want to go, and understanding the landscape of the situation around me, I was still blind to these things that now on the outset feel obvious. And it's just a stark reminder to me, and again hopefully to somebody else watching this video, that doing the groundwork isn't always, it's never done. It's always something that you're going to be constantly doing and improving on and reflecting on to make sure that you've got as accurate of a picture as possible. So that's the bulk of what I wanted to share in this video, but in terms of what comes next, I'm actually really, really excited for a number of different reasons. The first one is I'm going to take a little bit of time just to spend at home with my newborn boy, just because he still thinks it's the best thing in the world to hang out with me, and I know that won't last forever. So I'm going to try and capitalize on this situation as much as possible. But that's also going to give me an opportunity to maybe make different types of videos, invest a little bit more time into them than I have otherwise been, but also to work with some one-on-one coaching clients. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, leave a comment down below and we'll get something figured out. But the other thing that really I am excited about is that the knowledge I've gained through going through this process will absolutely help me in figuring out what type of role I want in the future is, and being really clear and concise before I actually make that application into that role. And for me, that gets me quite excited because it gives me the level of confidence that the realizations and learnings I've had from going through this process just means that I'm more likely to find a role that I'm incredibly satisfied with in the future. Now, of course, who knows what will happen and how long that will take, but that's a story for another day. And so while all of this process was driven by potential redundancy, where I've ultimately landed up in, I'm very, very happy with. And yeah, it's going to be an exciting time. So as I said, there's not really a huge amount to take away or no deliberate actions or specific things that I recommend anybody do with this, but it did just feel like something to share. And so here we are. So now over the next few weeks, I'm going to, as I said, spend some time making more videos and working with one-on-one coaching clients. But for the rest of this week, it's just going to be a little bit of downtime, maybe doing a little bit of admin work and just relaxing with my family. But with all that said, that's this week's video. You'll hopefully see a lot more coming from me in the future. And I just want to thank you all for being here. I hope you have an absolutely great week, and I will talk to you in the next one. Peace.